Welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show with Jared for now. We are trying to track down Tom. Tom. We're trying to track down Paul. He's missing in action. But it's been a big week. In fact, it's been a huge week for Tom. I keep on saying Tom. I'm sorry. It's that kind of week. How's that for a disclaimer? It's been a big week for hardware, graphics cards, and CPUs, and everything is happening. Nvidia has spilled a lot of the beans on their upcoming RTX 40 series. Intel Arc says it's coming soon, supposed to launch on October 12th. And then we've just had AMD has launched Ryzen 7000 series and their Zen 4 architecture. So that's what we're mostly going to talk about today, is the CPU side with Ryzen and Intel. All right, is it time to upgrade? That's probably one of the first questions people have. If you've been sitting on an older PC, I guess it depends on how old your PC is. If you have something from last year, probably not so much, right? If you have something, say like a 6th or 7th gen Intel, 1st gen Ryzen, I think it's probably getting time to look at pulling the plug and putting it out to pasture and buying the new CPUs and platforms. It's been a big launch for AMD. We have seen them for now. We got 1 month until we see Raptor Lake's official performance. We got a month until the response. But for now, AMD has reclaimed the performance throne. And not just on multi-threaded work. I mean, it was close on multi-threaded. There's going to be situations where Intel might come out ahead on optimizations or whatever. But on gaming, like Zen 4 is for real. They've got some huge performance boost. And not just Zen 4 and the Ryzen 9 7950X that costs $600, right? It's the lower tier Zen 4s that are proving extremely impressive. The Ryzen 5 7600X, if you check out our review, it offered nearly the same level of gaming performance as the big brother that costs twice as much. I'll go ahead and post this in chat for those of you who haven't read the review, which would be kind of shocking to me. Like, who hasn't read our review? I don't know. I should say, who hasn't read our review that's going to come and watch our show? Raise your hand, let us know. All right. Questions that people are throwing out here. Where can I get a nuclear reactor for 4090 and Raptor Lake? And the thing is Raptor Lake's not really that much more power intensive than Alder Lake when you get right down to it. I mean, at the high end, it's not. On the i5s and i7s, it is a little bit more. Zen 4 is increasing power levels. I'm very curious to see the actual power levels on Raptor Lake versus Zen 4 when it launches. We've got that stuff covered in our review. 4090, that's another entirely different situation though. I mean, these 16-pin power adapters I've been seeing, and I'm like, most of them seem to be going the route of quad 8-pin connectors, and I'm like, I've got 4 8-pin connectors, but 2 of them are on the same cable strand, so actually I've got 6 8-pin connectors, but I'm like, yeah, do you really want to have 2 of them feeding the same adapter? I don't know. We got to wait another, what's the, I'm getting so bogged down. So October 12th is actually the launch date for RTX 4090, and I think that's the announced launch date for Intel Arc as well. Pray for me if you're that kind of person, right? Like, pray for me, because it's going to be crazy. I've got a lot of testing to get done in the next 2 weeks, a little bit more. Still waiting. Like, Paul is saying he wanted 1 o'clock Central Time. Isn't it 1 o'clock? No, it's. I thought he meant 1 o'clock Eastern Time. So Paul is joining us shortly. I could go off the air and come back. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. we've got a lot of things happening this fall. Is it time to upgrade, though? I want to start there. I mean, obviously, if you're waiting for Intel, you've got to wait another month. You've got to wait another month for RTX 40 series to launch. Do you want to spend $1,600 on a top tier 4090? Otherwise, you're probably waiting 2 months, and then you've got to see what AMD's got going on. But if you're in the market, if you're thinking about upgrading, like this is going to be a great time to do so, because we'll have new platforms from AMD. We have new platforms and CPUs and everything from Intel. I mean, you can run Raptor Lake on the 600 series, but why not go whole hog? Just buy a new motherboard as well. DDR5 memory, I think, is going to matter more this round. Alder Lake, when it launched last year, was like first gen DDR5, and it seems like DDR5 has come a ways in the past year. So hopefully you didn't splurge on a very expensive DDR5 kit last year that underperforms this year. But yeah, questions coming in while I wait for Paul. Will power draw increase with every generation of CPUs and GPUs going forward? This is something that NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang talked about, and he basically is like, Moore's law is dead. He iterated that Moore's law is dead, which is funny because Intel's Pat Gelsinger came back, and he's like, Moore's law is alive and well. And they both have very different takes on things. How do you get more performance without increasing power and all these things? How do you get more transistor density? Chip stacking is one way, chiplets is another way. But I think it's safe to say that the gains have radically slowed down, even if Pat Gelsinger wants to say otherwise. Like, Moore's law is very much slowed down. It was never a law. It was an observation. It was a, hey, look, we can pack more transistors every generation. And like every exponential increase, it has to stop somewhere. We are approaching sizes of atoms here, and you're not going to get like single atom transistors, I don't think. Maybe someone in the future will prove me wrong, but when you're down to whatever they're at, they say Intel 7, they say 5 nanometer, they say 3 nanometer. That's not actually any physical aspect of any chip. It's become marketing. Things are shrinking. Things are getting more dense. I mean, you look at the chip density for the RTX 4090 and you look at the previous generation Ampere, they've definitely increased, but the gains are slowing down, and it's not surprising if we get less power. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Paul and I had a miscommunication. Paul said 1 o'clock. I thought he meant Eastern time because our headquarters is in the Eastern time. So I was like, okay, yeah. So he wanted it an hour from now. We're going to start.
It doesn't matter either way. I'm so lost in all of these different time zones I've been in lately.
And you're in benchmarking hell, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
And I'm joining you. I mean, I could tell you what I'm doing, but you'll just have to.
It should be
fill in the blanks.
Yes. Jared's got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's been an exciting week. I do have. Where's that? I could show that. Check this out.
Are you sure?
Oh my gosh! This is what I'm going to be doing shortly. ATX 3.0 power supply from Corsair. HX 1500i with 16-pin power adapter. That box is super heavy.
Yes. That's a good-looking power supply. I need to get some ATX 3.0 power supplies. Plural. Yes.
All right. Let's see. What do we got here? I'm waiting 3 weeks. Yes. Let's see. Someone had an observation. The most shocking thing this week is how much stock Zen 4 still has on Newegg and in store. Zen 3 sold out day one. Sold like hot pies. Zen 4, people are not buying them.
Yeah, they probably have tons of supply when they were ordering, wafers and packaging and doing all of the things that they do was back during the shortage. So they probably have massive supply. And, it's just, I don't think it's necessarily because people weren't as happy with the chips, even though there is a lot of that out there. I think two things are hurting them. Number one is when they planned for this was before the shortages. So they have or during the shortages, so they have a whole ton of inventory. And number two, a lot of people are on the fence. I mean, Raptor Lake is Raptor Lake is coming. I mean, you should be on the fence. If you're going to make a good decision right now, it would be to be on the fence and to wait to see what Intel has coming with Raptor Lake.
Paul, your video is super pixelated.
Is it really?
Yeah. That's what I'm seeing, so I'm assuming that's what others see. It looks fine on your end, but I hear you fine, so that's at least good. Nice mic, Paul.
Yes. Well, let me see what I can do.
Let's see. Someone else here. There are several videos out regarding fixing Ryzen 7000 with an economy mode, PBO2, etc. Do you think AMD should fine-tune their chips via CPU or via BIOSes or Ryzen master patches? Do they need to be fine-tuned, or is what they give you out of the box what you should expect, or what's your thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, fine tuning it. I mean, I guess it depends. What is the intention? What are you trying to solve for? I mean, if the power consumption, if you feel like that is too high, you can run it in eco mode, of course. That's always an option. Eco mode has been there forever. I mean, do you need to fix it? That's subjective, I guess. I mean, what exactly is the problem that you're looking to solve? I guess that would be the question.
Yeah, it's like the people who are always like, oh, buy a Vega, but then undervolt it. And I say, you could do that, and usually it would work. But there's reasons that AMD and NVIDIA and Intel select voltages and all that stuff. They have to, they want to cast the widest net. They want everything to work as best as possible, not as efficient as possible, not as fast as possible, but like they need to define a target that they're like, we can get lots of chips that meet this spec. And so sometimes that means you get better chips that are running hotter than they need to, consuming more power than they need to, not clocking as high as they could, right? So you can tune, and that's why we're enthusiasts, right? That's why we do these things. But if you want to know what most people out of box are going to get, that's why they have their specs.
I mean, I think that they're tuned they are tuned a little bit high, on the power side, but only when they're under load. I mean, if you're doing a lot of heavy work that's going to make them consume a lot of power, then you want that work to be done faster. This is the idea of efficiency. People are saying, oh, well, it runs up to 95 degrees Celsius. Well, yeah, but almost all modern chips do, and so did the prior gen chips. In case folks forgot, you can go back and look at AMD's own guidelines for the previous gen chips. It's very clear, like even on the second page of our review for the 5950X, it says it can run up to 95C. That's what it is. So when they run up into that higher thermal envelope, they're getting the work done faster. Sure, you could tune it to run it at 80C, but then the work takes longer. So which way are you, if you want it to be slower, sure, turn it down. Or buy a lower end chip. I mean, if you want a slow chip, make it slow. They've tuned it for performance, which is exactly what they and their competitor have been doing. So I think a lot of the concerns that you're seeing are vastly overblown. Every single Intel chip has this exact same behavior for 3 generations. So, I mean,
Let's move on to the Raptor Lake for budget gamers since it supports DDR4, or should you go for DDR5 and choose Intel or AMD?
If you're talking about budget gaming right now, DDR4 is going to be your better choice.
Yeah.
Raptor Lake, from what Intel is saying, Raptor Lake, even if Intel is overstating their performance gains dramatically, even if they can get half as much as they say they're going to get, this is going to be very close between Zen 4 and Raptor Lake. And what it comes down to then is price. And Intel's going to win on price, period. We already know that.
We expect Core i5 we'll see a 13400 probably for $200, right?
Yeah, and it'll have 4 E-cores. And then you look at, even on the high end, Intel's flagship, the 13900K, is undercutting the 7950X by $100. Of course, that's not budget. but it gives you a general sense of how Intel is positioning these chips. They are pricing them very aggressively. And
wait.
the performance could even be a wash, but Intel has the value option.
Yeah. Let's see. This was I showed this and then took it off. I really appreciate Pat Gelsinger going on stage and acknowledging GPU crazy prices and trying to provide a cheap Intel GPU, even if it's not a great gaming GPU. We're talking about the Arc A770, which Pat Gelsinger announced at Intel Innovation this week, that it will be priced starting at $329. And Intel has provided benchmarks already in the past saying we expect an A770 to beat across the board a 3060 Ti, an RTX 3060 in performance. I think they did the 3060 because maybe the Ti is more like a Ti or maybe even fractionally slower. But the point is, they're going at the 3060's official MSRP with a card that should outperform it, is what Gelsinger is saying. And we'll see, like, that is presumably the 8GB A770. There's a 16GB version as well. That's what Intel is making with their A770 limited edition. Not sure on the pricing on that yet. We'll share more once we find out. A750, we also don't know the price on that. A580, Intel's not talking much about A580. I think it's still coming. I don't think it's going to launch at the same time as the A700 series. But yeah, they're based, and Intel they've got manufacturing, scale. Even though TSMC is making their chips, right? Intel is no stranger to manufacturing, motherboards and other parts, or having people do it for them. So they can hopefully move a lot of cards and undercut the prices and bring prices down. And of course, Intel wants to gain market share in the GPU space. They have effectively zero for dedicated GPUs right now. So, anything they can get is a win. Matthew Anderson, do you know if buying Expo memory can work in Intel systems and vice versa?
Yes. However, the Expo profile, for now, it appears that the Expo profiles will not load as XMP. So there's quite the story behind Expo versus XMP. And what happened is this: XMP is an Intel standard. AMD doesn't even know the full definition of the standard. So some of the timings and things that it adjusts, AMD isn't even aware of, because there is no published spec of just what XMP changes. You can't go somewhere and see every single thing. And the memory vendors actually don't even publish it. With Expo, they created their own, because with DDR5, the timings become so important that since they can't adjust XMP, and they don't even know the definition of it, it's a closed specification, they can't tune it for their own chips. And the timings are becoming extremely important for XMP, or for DDR5. So they created their own spec. And if you go, you can see every single timing that it changes. As part of the spec, the memory vendors are required to publish a massive table that shows you every single thing that has changed, which is refreshing. It's nice. Once again, we see AMD using open source to its advantage, or except this time they've literally created an open specification. I'm going to jump back in a different browser to see if that fixes my
All right, Paul's going to step out for a second. Let me see what other question. Oh yes, we will get to this. Was Paul the one that leaked the 34-core Raptor Lake? He didn't. He didn't leak it. He spotted it. Intel leaked it, or their partner. Like, it's funny because he'll come back on here in a minute and he'll talk about it. But yeah, tell us about the 34-core Raptor Lake, Paul.
Well, I didn't leak it. We just have
Intel
eyeballs.
happened to.
So I mean, it's kind of a funny story. So
Here,
I was a little bit bushed when I got off the plane at the event at Intel. I had just came out of the Ryzen 7000 NDA. So I basically hadn't slept the night before, and my flight was at like 6 a.m. So I had to go there. I had to write up the Raptor Lake NDA. So I was writing for hours and hours and hours. These aren't small projects. at times. If you look, those words take time to put on the page. And so I went through the whole first day of briefings and everything. I was pretty tired. I went and I took like a 2-hour nap. Here I am telling on myself, but it was after all of the briefings, but it was during the first 2 hours of the showcase. The showcase was going on for 4 hours. So I went down there and I went to see Gordon Maong because Gordon from PC World, because I was supposed to meet him to do a video. And I was like, man, what's good on the floor? What's good? He's like, well, hey, come check this out. So he took me over here. Now he didn't know that this was the thing. And then Ian from used to be with the non-tech was over there, and we started talking and we're looking at it. We're like, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. So it turned out that, and Ian thought it looked like Ice Lake, which is a really good, from looking at the design, yes, it
looked
definitely
like the Ice Lake X or whatever.
Yes, it looked like Ice Lake X, but it wasn't. The guy, to prove us wrong, flipped it over and said, well, look, yeah, it is Raptor Lake, but they didn't realize there was some confusion. The guys in the booth, absolutely, they were not aware that this was not a released product. Even when they showed us the sticker, he's like, see, look, it is. Because they became confused. And they're like, well, X person, so-and-so, they gave us his name, I won't say it. But they said he just grabbed it from the office and brought it over. And
just grabbed the wafer that's sitting there.
Grabbed the wrong one.
Oh, my goodness.
And yes. So I took some pics. They weren't that great, but I ran to go write it up because this is the thing. There were a bunch, you got to get it up. The next morning I went back to the booth. First thing when the show floor opened, I went right over there and asked them about the wafer. It was gone.
I bet they were really excited about your story the day before too, right?
I would say that the feelings were clear. So I won't say which way they went, but it was clear. But hey, they showed it to a whole showroom full of people for a period of 4 hours, and nobody realized it. Other journalists were posting pictures of the wafer to Twitter, and they didn't know. That actually is not Raptor Lake that we have seen or the design. Nobody caught it. So
now we think this is, like, they say it's Raptor Lake-S, but we figured this is actually Sapphire Rapids, and that it will be sold as a Raptor Lake for.
So here's the thing: the die actually doesn't match up with Sapphire Rapids that we're aware of. After some closer examination, as the dust settles around this, it actually looks like this is a completely new design. It's probably based on Sapphire Rapids, but blocks have been moved around. And
is HEDT about ready to make a comeback, or is this just for workstations?
Well, workstation and HEDT has become one and the same in some respects. Whether or not they'll do that, we don't know. There were some questions with the head of the client computing group earlier that day about would HEDT return, and they were non-committal. Now they have moved. In the past, workstation has been underneath the data center group, but about 6 months ago, they moved workstation from data center to the client group, which, because the workstation chips have traditionally, and even HEDT is based upon repurposed server silicon, the Xeons, right? They're just repurposing it and using it for HEDT. So because of that, it makes the change to putting it under client definitely implies that, they're maybe not targeting as much of a professional crowd specifically. So who knows? We'll see.
95 degrees Celsius. Why are people not talking about it?
Well, because you can go to our review of the 10900K, the 11900K, and the 12900K for the last 3 generations, and you can see that Intel's processors on the top end run at 100 degrees Celsius. So
this is 5 degrees less for Zen 4?
Correct. And you can also go to the review of the previous gen Ryzen 5000, And you can look on the second page of the 5950X review where there's a table, or AMD provides, that shows that they will run up to 95 degrees Celsius. They was like this with the last generation. You can also Google, and PC Gamer wrote an article 1 year ago titled that Ryzen runs at 95 degrees Celsius and it's fine. Let me find the actual title for you. This is a known. It's very surprising. It's
Generic Ninja says 95C Zen 4 is an emotional problem by users being mistaken for a technical problem.
AMD views Ryzen 5000 CPU temperatures up to 95 degrees Celsius as typical and by design. Published on January 11th, 2021. This is old news, people.
Yeah.
I mean,
what
I'm
about
sorry.
This? Like 95 short term, what about, I mean, obviously.
No, 95 degrees over any period of time for the length of the warranty period is perfectly fine. It's within specification. So there is no degradation of the chip from running at those temperatures. If it's at 96, then you start to lose something. If you go to 100, you're really losing something. 110, you're going to fry it. But if you're at 95, it's going to live throughout the warranty period, period.
And if it doesn't, then you get a replaced CPU.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, let's be real. Getting a chip to 95 for month after month, like, what are you doing on your PC? I mean, like, are you? This is
only under load. It's not at stock. It's not, or not at idle. It's when you're running a heavy workload. And the way that you have to look at it is this. This is how the processors of today look at it and have looked at it for a long time. For the people who are making a huge deal about this, who actually probably aren't paying much attention for several years. The chip has there's an amount of thermal headroom. It can run in here. So we'll say when it's under load, it can run from 80 to 95 C. Sure, they can make it top out at 80 C, but it's going to be slower. The 80 to 95 C, you need to think about this thermal headroom as what it is. That's performance. If you can consume that power in order to push that temperature up to the top where it's still safe, right at the top of being safe, you are pushing that processor faster. So the work is getting done faster. So what's the difference between running at 80 C for 5 minutes or running at 95 C for 4?
Yeah.
Well, it's a big difference if you're looking to do things quickly. And this is a performance segment. It's for enthusiasts. It's what it's designed to do. They want it to be fast. I mean, I'm not saying that it's great. Well, but it's
one of the things of slowing down of Moore's law, right?
Yeah. You're going to see this more, but we've already been seeing this for years.
Yeah. Will that make it into space heater? Now, this is important because
it does generate heat. Yes,
it generates heat, but keep in mind,
again,
like,
if you're at 80 C for 5 minutes, or you're at 95 C for 3.5, think of the amount of heat. Think about the amount of heat that you're generating as, okay, I'm going to fill a bucket. This bucket is the amount of heat that I'm putting into the room. This bucket of heat. If you're running at 80 C for 5 minutes, you're generating heat for longer. So is it a space heater? Sure, chips are space heaters these days. Come on, look at what the 4090 will be. But look at the 3090.
This is nothing like, this is the thing. So you have to,
you're putting in the same amount of heat, if not less, because you run more efficiently if you're running faster. And it's more efficient. You get more work done per watt, period. End of story with the Ryzen 7000 processors. So that means you're not running as long.
And it's not about heat either. Like, hitting 95C on a chip that's like this big is not the same as a big old fire, right? It's all about power consumed. So these are typically consuming up to 170 watts. We've got power figures that we'll get to later. I mean, in comparison, like 170 watts from your CPU is nothing compared to what your graphics card puts out while gaming, especially if you've got like the high-end 30 series. Those are 300, 400 watts for these GPUs. We're going to see, I'm sure we will see 600 watt 4090s from third-party vendors, right? They'll be liquid cooled, they'll be whatever, and it's like, that's 3 times what your CPU is consuming.
So you're spending all this money on this massive space heating GPU for sure. But are you going to complain that the CPU? I mean, but you want the CPU, but people want the CPU to run at a lower temperature and be slower and not push that GPU along, just in the name of a few, 50 watts. I mean, yeah, I get it, but at the same time, I don't understand this. I understand clickbait, and I understand making a big deal out of things that we've already known are going on for a long time in order to get what people are getting. Yes, I get that part of it, but I don't get the other part of it. So, I mean, yeah, it's not great, but reality has been around for a while.
I'm still trying to build slides, Paul.
Sorry.
That would have been, if I had an extra hour, that would have been great. All right, let's see. Let's go ahead and hit the spec sheet here. This is, and I think I've got, there's a couple of question marks that I think are no longer question marks because I updated an old slide. But walk us through. This is our specifications for 13900K and the Ryzen 7000 series at the top, and looking at new generation versus previous generation.
Yep. So when you're comparing them, I mean, the big thing here is when you're looking at the Intel 7 that they're talking about with the 13900K, this isn't your previous gen Intel 7 by any means. Intel could have probably called this Intel 6. If they were a third-party foundry like TSMC, they would have. Because the changes that they've made to the voltage frequency curve and how performance scales, both at the high and the low end, from what they've shown are actually damn impressive, to be honest. And now they are making some claims that they know we're going to test for. I mean, the claims seem crazy, but they know for sure when they say that the 13900K at 65 watts can give you the same performance as the 12900K at 241 watts. They've made this claim. They have charts to prove that they've made the claim. Doesn't prove that it's true. But that is a massive jump in efficiency, and they know we're going to test for this. So I think that they have to be the claim has to be pretty close, because they know for sure that at least some of the reviewers are going to test for this, because they are making what is it sounds almost an unrealistic claim. This is what you would expect from a new generation. So with Intel 7, it's going to be pretty impressive. They've also done a lot of other very smart things in the architecture, which, I've written up a lot of that in our coverage of the announcement. But I believe that it's going to be very, very close with AMD. I think that both of these are going to be very closely matched. So you've got more cache. An important thing here is that they're using the cache in a more intelligent manner now. So they're switching between using it as non-inclusive and inclusive on the fly with a 100 millisecond or microsecond granularity, which is incredible. And they can do this on a per core basis, which is also amazing. This is something that I didn't even know was possible, and it wasn't until they did it. There are a lot of fine-grained changes that are pretty dramatic in Raptor Lake. Raptor Lake should be very impressive.
All right, let's see.
But look at the price.
Yeah. So Intel talked about raising their prices in the past month, right?
So what they did is they raised prices. Yes, they did. They publicly, the CEO went on their investor earnings and did confirm that they were going to raise prices. Now, they didn't raise prices on the high end. They did raise prices on the low end. Yesterday, only yesterday, I was in a room with the head of the client computing group at Intel, Michelle Holtis, and she said, when asked why they only raised prices on the Core i5, she said, we're trying to gain market share in the higher price ranges. So, AMD is really, Intel really outperformed AMD in almost every aspect in the Core i5 versus Ryzen 5. I mean, Intel was outperforming AMD with Alder Lake by miles, especially considering the price. So Intel obviously sees a chance to raise the price there. But when it comes to that high end where AMD is making all the margin, they can really cut them down. And they're undercutting them by $100, and I bet you they'll be very close. That's my assumption. I am in firm belief this is going to be very close. Price will be the determining factor.
All right. Let's see. I need to see what's coming up next and make sure. All right, let's go ahead and talk performance. We're going to look at this. Oops. This is gaming performance over the past couple generations of CPUs. 1080p, Windows 11, geometric mean of, what is it, like 8 games?
Yeah.
And it's all tested with a 3090. So, one thing to keep in mind here is if you're the type of person that wants the absolute fastest, we don't yet know how this chart changes when we go to 4090 or a 7900X, right? It should become more CPU bound. So, we'll find out in the next month or whatever. Paul will get to rerun just a little few benchmarks, Paul.
Just like, a few, 1,000.
Can you please retest every GPU on this? So yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens with a 4090, but even with a 3090 at 1080p, you should be mostly CPU limited. So we're not seeing massive gains over Intel. They are coming out ahead though. And the important thing here is to look
Intel had a big lead. Intel had a massive lead. If you want to have some perspective, look at the difference between the 5900X and the 12600K. The 12600K, a $289 CPU, was beating the flagship Ryzen model. Then you take and you look at the 5900X and you compare that to the 12900K. We're looking at a very big difference there between these two flagships. But when we look at the difference, so AMD is essentially caught up and just went a little bit. They had a lot of ground to make up. Alder Lake was truly it's a good chip. It's a good chip for gaming. So, but Intel's with Raptor Lake, they're going to make a jump. The question is how big. Intel's saying anywhere from 5 on average to up to 24%. It depends upon the mix of games. So that tells me we're going to be very close, because with most people, they're not going to be pushing at 3090. So then price becomes the determining factor. And Intel has shown that they are willing to take a hit on margin. So.
How important are these PBO and overclocked figures, do you think? Like, what should people look at in this chart first? Should we look at the top and, we see the X3D obviously, but then we've got, 7950X PBO, 12900K at 5.1 gigahertz. And
so it just depends on how much do you want to spend on time on this. With the 12900K, to overclock it, you're going to have to spend some time to tune it manually. PBO is going to run to the limit of your cooler, and it's one click. But the thing is the gains aren't that great, and probably most of that is coming from the memory clock or the memory overclock, because what we're doing is we're combining a memory overclock and we're engaging PBO at the same time. And AMD's overclocking headroom is not great. The reason why AMD's chips are running at 95C at stock when they're under load is because they're giving you everything they have at stock settings, right? What we would in the past have traditionally thought of as an overclock, that's it. I mean, it's at stock. So with PBO, your headroom is limited. This is with the 280 millimeter cooler. I did some tests to see if hooking it up to a 720 millimeter loop, not my 1024 millimeter loop, because I didn't have time to mess that. I'm having an issue with it. So I just went with the 720. That's equally stupid for most people. It's pretty much unlimited thermal capacity for a water cooler. And I didn't see anything over what I saw with the 280 millimeter. Now with the 280, of course, I'm running the fans at 100%, so it's loud. It's cranking, right? But we're testing performance. So, PBO and overclocking is losing a lot of the appeal on the high end. Of course, it's been that way for a while. Where the money's at with those types of things is when you look down on the low end. And here you can see that and especially with Intel. Look at the 12600K. Look at the jump that you get with that, for instance, compared to the jump you get with an AMD processor. It's just a lot different. So I see people talking about thread director. It's a good time.
All right. Let's see. Other slides. Same deal. Slightly different list of games being tested, but now we move to 1440p, and this is like the flip side of if you buy a 4090 next month, you might become more CPU limited. If you don't have a 3090 or a 4090, what if you're going with something like a 6700 XT or a 3070? You're going to very much start running into GPU bottlenecks, and everything starts to flatline, right?
Yeah.
So we test it. It's there for those who want to see it, but keep in mind that we want to see what GPU unlimited CPU performance is like, right? And on the GPU
I'll
side,
be
we
honest,
want to.
I hate running 1440p on a 3090. The audience demands it, and hey, I work for you guys. You're my employers. When you click the site, you come read our articles. So if people want to see it, I'll show them. I don't think we learn a whole lot from them typically. Maybe with the 4090, we'll start to see this look like a 1080p chart. Hopefully we do, but it does serve a good purpose of saying, hey, let's keep it real. The real difference in a lot of situations isn't going to be as big as we see when we're testing 1080p, which is our, hey, look, this is max performance.
And this is the flip side of what I do. I'm the GPU tester, right? So
yeah, that's it.
I take the fastest CPU I can get, and unlike Paul, I'm not running stock memory settings and timings. I'm not massively overclocked, but my test bed, and we couldn't get DDR5 when I put the PC together. It was just too hard to acquire, not worth the gains. So we went with DDR4, but I did enable XMP memory. It is running at DDR4 3600, because I don't want the CPU limiting my graphics benchmarks any more than it has to. So I'm looking at, these CPU benchmarks that Paul's doing, and I'm going, oh, crap, do I need to look at upgrading my system, my GPU test bed again? And, Paul says he tests like all these CPUs, dozens of CPUs. I've got, 65 graphics cards that I've put through our GPU performance suite. It takes a long time. Let's see, single-threaded performance.
This is important. Yes.
This is a big one because
look at the 5950X getting kicked in the teeth by a $199 12400 in that chart. That is where they were. That was situation critical for AMD on single threaded performance with Ryzen 5000 versus Alder Lake. And then look at the 12900K at stock is doing 420 compared to the 5950X at 347. So this was a big area. These numbers are real when you click on your application and you see it load. When you see your browser go bam, right? Or you see it go bam. Right? It's like bam.
Bam versus bam.
Bam, yeah. When things happen fast and you're clicking around or this is it. And here we could see that there was a massive disparity. Ryzen closed it, but the problem is they closed the gap. They didn't do a whole lot more than that. As you can see, they're in a dead heat. So Raptor Lake, just by virtue of kicking up the power a little bit, and you're looking at Raptor Lake, they're going up to 5.8, and they have a 6.0 gigahertz, a 6 gigahertz, the world's first 6 gigahertz desktop chip in the hopper.
It's coming soon.
Yes. So this will be one to keep an eye on with Raptor Lake.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens there with that clock speed and such on Raptor Lake. Multi-threaded, yes. So this is something where the folks are talking about thread director. So I'll shoehorn that in a little bit. But first, we will talk about where we're at. What you're seeing with the Ryzen, there's a power chart that I made in the review. Basically, with don't
Ryzen,
jump ahead, man.
Yeah, okay. Is the chart in here? Okay,
I'm going to get to it.
Yes. Basically, they're delivering more power to the socket, and this allows them to do more. We'll explain exactly what that more is, and it is transformative. When you look at the 7950X, it has the same it has the same number of cores as the 5950X, and look at that difference in performance. It's something like 40 some odd percent, 41 if I remember off the top of my head. In our measurements, not from what they say, that's what we see. And that's a huge gain. And it's not really coming from the architecture as much as one would think, because they still have a very similar infinity fabric, which means that parallelism can be constrained by how fast they can talk between the cores. And they have the same number of cores. So there are a lot of things that are the same, and we didn't see huge increases in IPC and threaded work. So a lot of this is just being able to pump that power through that new socket that allows them to do it. It is explosive. So you look at the 12900K, they're beating it very easily, even with an overclock. But Raptor Lake, they're talking about giving you the same performance at 65 watts that this chip gives you at 241. So when you think about the new chip reaching its high performance level, you can imagine we're going to see a similar jump. I expect this to be an area where AMD will have a slight advantage in some things, and Intel will come out ahead in others, and it's going to come down to price. That's what
I need to.
These are informed guesses.
My slides.
These are informed guesses. I mean, I don't have the chips though. I don't have Raptor. Like I haven't tested it. To be clear,
coming soon. All right.
And with Thread Director. So, Thread Director, I see some folks are saying we should talk more about Thread Director with Raptor Lake. So, what they've done is they've characterized more workloads with Thread Director, and they have made some, as they've said when they first released Alder Lake, they did say, and the hybrid architecture, they said that Thread Director will become better over time, and it absolutely will. You can totally expect that they have a new version of it baked into Windows 11, the second half 22 update, I believe that's what it's called. And it is going to provide big improvements to Thread Director, and not only for Raptor Lake, also for Alder Lake. So people who use Alder Lake will get a free little kick because it is going to classify and place threads in a better, more intelligent manner. They have a method whereby they examine them using machine learning in order to do this on the fly, and it has improved performance greatly of Thread Director. How much, we'll have to test. It does mean that I get the distinct pleasure of retesting every single thing I just retested in these charts that you're looking at, because I have to test everything on the same.
Hey, you can be glad that you don't have CPU drivers that update every month.
Yes. Hey, this is what we do. So, but there's going to be some work. If you're looking at reviewers and reviews of Raptor Lake, and the reviewer has not updated to second half 22, you're not seeing what it can do. And this is a free update, so there's no excuse not to do it, because anyone who's using these chips is going to update to them.
I want to flip back. I'm going through the comments. I've caught up on doing my background slide manufacturing, but in the vid with Ian, Tech Potato, more, whatever he goes by these days, you were pumped about the 34 core. Good stuff. Can you expand on what it means to you, us, the industry, by Intel stressing volume a lot?
Well, volume is important because it gives them financial horsepower, as they have called it in the past. It gives them pricing advantages. They make their own chips, and not only do they make their own chips, they make a lot of chips. Intel at peak can pump out 1 million dies per day. That's phenomenal. I mean, do the math on how many CPUs per second that is, somebody. Their scale is monumental, and when you have that kind of scale, it reduces the manufacturing costs. It's just basic economics. So it gives them a lot of room to play. They can attack. They can, they can price competitors out of the market or attempt to do so. Yes, that as well. But they built up a lot of their production capacity as well. So, I mean, it's just them saying, look, we're big, don't forget us. And one thing to think about here is something that actually the head of CCG said in response to a question yesterday, is as the PC market goes into a decline, Some of these OEMs, not some of them, all of them, the OEMs and motherboard makers and people of that nature are all from everywhere, from pre-builts to laptops to motherboard makers, et cetera. They're going to reduce the amount of money that they spend on creating new products. So they're simply going to create fewer new options. And when they're creating fewer, that's actually can be an advantage for Intel because they are so big and they make so much. When those decisions are made, you know, some of these OEMs and whatnot who are also focused on volume are going to focus more on them. It would be more likely that they will be choosing to build, you know, additional systems around them. Volume is the thing. I mean, you're just the biggest, you know, you're the biggest kid on the playground, right?
Let's see. A few other questions here. Yeah, this is a good one. Slim Jim. Someone said AVX 512 from AMD isn't truly AVX 512. It's double pump AVX 256.
A lot of reasons why they do that.
Yeah.
So, okay, double pumped AVX 512. What does that mean? That means that they're not actually running AVX 512 as one instruction. So we always say, how many instructions per clock? What's the IPC? How many things can you complete in one clock? Bam. No, you know, of course you're getting 6 billion clocks a second for a 6 gigahertz thing, for instance. But anyway, in one cycle, they're not running it in one cycle. They have a 256 unit, and they're taking the instruction at 256 and they're running it twice. So it takes them 2 clocks to do it. Now, there are advantages to this approach and there are disadvantages. Number one disadvantage is performance, because you only get about a 30% kicker.
Why is it faster than, I mean, like, if you're just using 256 twice, why is it any faster?
Because the idea of a
SIMD 256.
The idea of a SIMD instruction, that's the type of instruction, a vectorized instruction, is to reduce the number of instructions in order to produce a lot of work, because instructions have to work their way through the pipeline. So if I want to complete 256 mathematical calculations, right? This is my basic understanding, the most basic way. If I want to complete 256 calculations and I also have to issue 256 instructions, I've doubled the amount of work. But what if I issue one instruction and I do 256 math operations? I've literally cut my work down absolutely tremendously. The amount of work that the processor and the pipeline and prefetch, dispatch, retire, if you're familiar with the pipeline stages of a modern processor, has to produce to do those 256 is a lot less. So by the same token, now you're doing one instruction, you're getting 512. So even though you're running it twice, you're still reducing the amount of work that you have to do to get 512 answers.
So wait, help me out here, because I may have misunderstood this in the past. Is AVX 512 512 instructions, or is it 512 bits?
It's 512 bits.
Okay, so it's not 512 instructions, but it's the same idea.
Yeah. Basically, this is like you're reducing
I deal with GPUs, so you know when NVIDIA talks about tensor cores, they really do have a tensor core that does 512 operations in an instruction, right? And NVIDIA says it's not like if you do the math and you say, wait, you're doing 512 16-bit floating points in an instruction, wouldn't you multiply 512 by 16-bit, and that would give you this massive 4096-bit, or no, 8192-bit? Like, it's not 8192 bits. They're probably doing something like this where it's quad pumping or double pumping or whatever.
So SIMD is single instruction, multiple data, SIMD. So single instruction, multiple data, instead of one instruction, one data. So anyway, okay.
So it helps to do.
So they're double pumping. It's more efficient. They get about 30% faster, but there's also other advantages here. It's very easy for software to support this because they don't actually have to code in such a way. Now, I'm not an expert on how they code this, but to my understanding, this makes it a lot easier for software devs to understand it. Also, additionally, SIMD, because you're running so many things in parallel and there are no misses, essentially, It's a very efficient way of running it. It's all going to run at the same time. This is for sure. What happens is you get what are called localized brownouts on the silicon. They can't deliver power to that specific area enough, so they have to clock down. And Intel's known for this. When you hit AVX, you have an AVX offset. The chip runs slower. It's running slower, but you're getting so much more done per cycle that you're still faster. But with
Intel's AVX 512 really is 512, like it's one cycle for it.
Yeah,
and so that's
512. It's one cycle. Bam.
And they've talked
AMD
about
is
that.
Bam,
like,
bam.
When you think about toggling all of these transistors and doing 512 of them at a time, it sucks down a lot of power.
It causes brownouts. Yeah, it causes brownouts. So when Intel talks about SuperMem on their SuperFin transistors, SuperMem is just built-in capacitors inside the silicon to provide power so they don't have brownouts in certain areas. But anyway, with the way that AMD is doing it, there is no clock overhead. There is no brownout because you're running half-half. So it's pretty smart. There's no downclock. They can run AVX at full line rate. So they get a 30% kicker. It's good. I think it's a great implementation of it. I mean, you know.
All right. There's so many things to go through. All right, let's go back here. We've been talking about power. Oh, let's see. This is the official power ratings for the
Pay
AMD
attention
stuff.
to those amps. The amps. Everybody says, okay, let's look at PPT. PPT is watts. This is what we know. This is what we love to talk about. When you look at it, they added the 230 watt higher peak for the new 170 watt TDP class, but they also increased amps across the board, peak current and sustained current. So EDC and TDC, these are important parts of how the chip operates. Sustained current would be something like in a thermally constrained environment. How many amps when stuff's getting hot, right? I mean, we're not talking about the stuff being the processor. We're talking about VRMs. So AMD with Ryzen 7000, they added this new communication protocol with the motherboard, and it's called SVI3. What this does is it allows the chip to speak with the voltage regulators, the VRMs on your motherboard, and say, how hot are you? And it says, well, I'm X hot, I'm 95C. They said, oh, well, we can run you at 100, just like the chip. They can run it hotter than that. So now that they can speak and get telemetry, real-time telemetry data, they can run the VRMs harder and in a safe manner. And this allows them to increase the amount of power that they can deliver, not only to the socket, but to the amount of amps. This is the key. One of the biggest improvements to Ryzen 7000 is the ability to deliver more power to the socket. We'll show you why here in a minute. But don't sleep on this. And the reason why is because of SVI3. Now, Intel's had SVI3 for a long time. But for AMD, this is a move. There you go.
Okay, more power stuff. This is the power testing. So, lower's better. And again, you can see this big jump if you look at the 5950X, 5900X, and then you look at the 7950X.
It's sucking a lot more power, but the thing is you're getting the work done faster.
And the interesting bit to me that needs to be pointed out here is in this multi-threaded task, the 12900K still uses more power than a 7950X.
It sure does.
And we've got a couple of these. Y Cruncher, this uses AVX 512 or 256 as supported. So
and there's a new version of Y Cruncher that supports Zen 4, so I had to go back and
is this outdated? Or is this correct?
No, it's correct.
Okay.
I mean, of course. But yeah, I just saying I had to retest everything. Here I am complaining about all this testing. I love it. But this is correct, yes.
Paul lives for testing.
This is optimized for Zen 4. Yes.
All right, and then single-threaded. And this is also important because people say, oh, man, my PC's going to be using so much power. When you're just browsing the web, like so many of us do so often, this is why browsing the web can be done on a smartphone. The CPU is not doing a lot.
An important thing here that you'll see if you look at the actual Y Cruncher, this is Y Cruncher power. If you look at the Y Cruncher performance numbers, Zen 4 is fantastic. It's single core AVX 512. It's a massive speed up. The speed up isn't as pronounced when you do multi-threaded because SIMD instructions, AVX 512, requires tons of memory throughput. So they reach a point to where having all these cores needing all of this throughput, there's just only so much to go around. So something gets lost in the scaling. But AVX doesn't always run. Everybody associates AVX mentally with running on all these cores at the same time. That's actually not the case. So a lot of the benefit to running AVX on a CPU instead of a GPU is the fact that you can run it just blips, small, single thread, few threads. Sorry.
ADA power testing. I mean, like, not too
You
different
could,
from what we've already seen.
Yeah.
Power efficiency. This is, you were talking about this. So this is renders per day per watt.
Yep. This is a way of measuring power efficiency. And this is specific to this workload. We actually don't see a huge uplift with 7950X compared to the 5950X. It's way faster, but at the end of the day, it's consuming a similar amount of power to complete the workload. But there are other areas where it's going to be more efficient. I mean, it depends. Efficiency is a mixed bag, right?
Yep. And then this is that's the same thing plotted on a different
ish. Okay, so here's what we're doing here. This is a different version of it. Is again with what the chart that we were just looking at. We were looking at the average wattage, which if you think like it's a river, how fast the river is flowing. Okay, and this is why these can be a little bit misleading. So you need to see both sides of your efficiency picture. So we go back here, instead of saying how fast was the river flowing, we say how much water moved down the river during this period of time. So what we're doing is we're looking at power like we're filling up a bucket. What is the total amount of power that we use during this workload? And we convert that to kilojoules, which is a task energy metric. What is the total amount? Not how much was it sucking. If we go by the amount of time it took and how much power, what is the total amount that it took? So when you look at it that way, the 7950X is much more efficient than the 5950X because it's faster. So it uses the same amount of power, as you can see, as the 5950X. The 7950X uses a tiny bit less power in total. And you can see that on the vertical axis. So go back. The total power, where it's at 20 on the left-hand side, that's how much power it uses. It uses a little bit less power. But look, on the bottom is how fast is it. Look how much faster it is.
So if you're looking at this one, this is kind of like if you had infinite work and you're just running flat out 24/7, then the efficiency hasn't really improved. But the thing is, most of us, we're actually functioning more like this slide where it's like, hey, I need to encode this video and it's going to take 5 minutes to do it or whatever.
If it uses the same amount of power, but it does it 60 seconds faster, that's a win. Yeah. That's efficiency.
All right.
It's better.
I think this is, yes. We've now extended all of the slides I brought along for Zen 4 performance. Again, check out our full review. Paul's got lots more charts. I did not try to bring them all over because there's probably like 100 of them. I don't know. All the individual game charts, all the individual CPU single-threaded and multi-threaded charts, all that stuff is there. Mr. Raptor, we got a few more things to say about him, right? We talked about these already. All right, this is the announced.
You have 3 chips: Raptor Lake for desktop for the Intel sometime in January. Well, they haven't said that officially, but according to the rumors, sometime in January we're going to see a lot more chips. But for now, this is what you're getting. These are KF. Ks have graphics, KF do not. Otherwise, these are identical chips. It's a waste of chart space to do it like this. But hey, whatever. It looks more impressive. They're only releasing 3 chips. And if
are they all the same die?
Yes, they only created one more die for Raptor Lake. And I do talked about this a little bit in the article, but the CMS actually ate like 3 paragraphs. But anyway, so I had to rewrite it. I don't know if I went as far in depth the second time I wrote it, but yes, it's 1 die. So what they will do is probably repurpose Alder Lake for some of the Core i3 and below. So when they add E-cores into these things, they can just use an Alder Lake because they're adding more cores. One thing to look at here and conceptually realize is this is the first time that Intel has had a core count lead over AMD since 2017 when Ryzen arrived. Well, it depends on how you counted cores on other stuff, but they are using efficiency cores to get there. But when you look at these clocks, one thing here that is easy to overlook is the increase in the E-core clock speeds have increased a lot, and they have increased. I mean, look, you get a 4.3 boost on an E-core. They say now that the E-core has the exact same performance as a Skylake core in 14 nanometer, as it has the exact same performance, but at like a fraction of the power. So that is amazing.
If you're still hanging on to 6700K,
yes,
that means one of the little CPU blocks on Raptor Lake.
One block of 4, yeah.
Do I have a dice? I don't think I've got a
okay,
dice
but
shot.
yeah. It's like one tiny little piece is your 6700K and faster than it. And you look, it goes up to 4.3, but on the all core, so when that's the boost. So if you have one E-core that's busy, if you have all of the E-cores busy, the all core boost just went up 600 megahertz. That's a big change. So in threaded work, that's why you see this big difference between 12900K and the AMD flagship right now. That gap is going to close. They have really.
What is the all core actual boost for the E-cores now?
They're not. They don't have it listed. I asked for it. I'm waiting on a chart with all of the.
Well, you said it went up 600. What was it on Alder Lake?
600 megahertz. I believe that all core. I think it was around 3. Don't quote me.
Okay. So we could be getting. I mentioned this.
The 600 meg. There. Okay. That's
so this is the die shot, right? So the bigger greenish ones on the left, those are the P cores, and then to the right is the E cores. Is that right?
Yes. The blue blocks are actually 4 quad core clusters. So there's 2 on top, 2 on bottom. So 8 cores on top in the blue and 8 cores on bottom in the blue.
Now on Alder Lake, I seem to recall that the quad core E-core clusters were almost the same size as the P cores. It now looks like because of the added cache that maybe the E-core blocks
No, it's just because
larger?
of the way that it should still be roughly the same. It does look a little bit larger. They don't have it split in this view, right? But the size of the E-core should not have changed. So it's a very similar size. And you also have to look at how the P cores are longer. They're taller.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're talking about just square millimeters, it should be very close. 4 in 1 is the general rule. And that should not have changed. I mean, I spoke with both the lead architect for the E cores, the lead architect for the P cores, and the lead architect for the entire SoC. And the lead architect for the SoC, when we were speaking, he said that essentially all they did was elongate the die. That's it, really. They just copy pasted
to add the 2 extra blocks of the E-cores.
Yep, to add 8 more E-cores.
Now wait, but didn't cache sizes change, or do I have that wrong?
Correct, cache sizes doubled.
But the caches aren't inside the P-core.
They are.
E-core
The
blocks,
L2. The L2 is inside of the E-cores.
Okay.
Correct.
And the L3 cache also
is right down the middle. That's where it says Compute Fabric and LLC.
Right.
Your L3 is right in the middle of all of it. It was right there. It's on the other side.
But I'm saying do I have that slide? How much did it increase? With
I think it was 1.25 to. It wasn't a doubling.
No,
I would have to.
I think maybe I've got it. Let's go back into.
They did increase cache sizes.
All right, so this is the overview. New Z790 chipset. Yeah. Does this say anything about cache? No, it does not. So everything here, basically, how different is Z790 from Z690, Paul?
It's not.
Is there anything new?
You get. Yeah, there's barely anything new. You get
like Wi-Fi.
You get 8 more PCIe Gen 4.0 lanes. But what's funny is before you had 16 more PCIe 3.0, if I recall correct. They basically combined the two.
So they dropped the PCIe Gen 3.
They dropped PCIe Gen 3 and made it Gen 4. And
which is fine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's good. And then they increased USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2, 200 gigabit per second. They went from 4 to 5. You get one more. In effect, this is, yeah.
But you still got the same DMI. It's DMI 4 now, right?
Yeah, DMI, same DMI connection.
8 lanes. It's basically 8 lanes of PCI Express.
And Alder Lake
speed.
can drop in these, and this can drop in previous gen. You can drop either generation in either.
So
one.
realistically,
no functionality.
Realistically, you don't think you would lose any performance running Raptor Lake in a Z690?
Theoretically, you should lose nothing because it uses all of the same things like SVI3 and all like the infrastructure of that and the power delivery. Power delivery is going to be extremely close, almost identical. I don't think you would lose anything. I would be surprised.
Let's see. We've already talked about those. I mean, we saw the spec chart. So, and this is their big claims: 15% better single-threaded, 41% better multi-threaded, 24% gaming, 34% content creator. And these are all the usual up tos, right? So,
Yep.
Take them with a grain of salt. We'll see how they actually perform. What was AMD's improvement in single-threaded, did we say? I mean,
I don't recall, but they
AMD's own numbers, like when they said, hey, we got like X% more single-threaded, it was a big jump. They should be relatively close to tied after this, right?
Yeah. Well, no, they're tied right now.
Oh, they're tied right now.
AMD on single-threaded just tied Alder Lake. That's literally all they did.
So they tied Alder Lake, and now we're saying
Alder Lake's
Intel is
gonna be
ready
tied.
to go 15% faster.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's shaping up to be a big battle royale in the next month. We'll see where Raptor Lake lands. Let's see. I think that's all the slides now. Die shot. I did have the caches. 2 megabytes per P core versus 1.25 megabytes on Alder Lake, and then 4 megabytes per E core versus 2 megabytes on Alder Lake, right?
Yep.
So,
and the big thing here is the caches are smarter. They can flip between being inclusive and non-inclusive on the fly at 100 millisecond granularity.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. I won't go into it.
All right, let's see. Look at our
3DB cache is definitely the future. He says Yomo.
What is AVX 512 used for? Sorry, I'm scrolling up and looking at questions we might have missed.
It depends on what you're doing. It depends upon developer support, but typically it's used for heavily threaded applications where you need to do a whole lot of work at the same time. But you can also see applications that use it in single threads and things like that. It's being woven into all kinds of things. Some games even use it. They do. It's rare, but they use it. It's a performance booster. When you use, anything can use it. Where is it used? It just depends on where it's been implemented. But in what really needs it.
This is going to be a really tough question for you, Paul. Ready? Why are you shilling for AMD? I don't get it. Which I laugh at because Erica says, how are they shilling? And I'm like, I don't get it either. We are not AMD shills. We are not Intel
I've been
shills.
called an Intel shill. I've been called an AMD shill. As long as I'm being called both, that's good.
Yeah. Let's see. You said you wanted to see Yahoo. There we go.
Yep.
You talked about that.
So 3D Vcache for the 5800X 3D is AMD can't beat it. It was Zen 4, not yet. And Intel definitely can't beat it. They have no answer. Intel definitely can't beat it. They have no answer to my question, direct question to the head of CCG yesterday. Seems like a year ago. Things happen so much for me lately, but they didn't say they don't have an answer, but a non-answer tells me you don't have an answer. Because the 5800X 3D Raptor Lake will not beat. Now, the problem is you do have to be realistic about the 5800X 3D. It doesn't accelerate all games. And when it comes to application performance, you're losing a lot in a lot of cases. And then additionally is much more expensive. It is somewhat exotic. But if that's what you're into, if you want that, that's what you're going to get. Now, Zen 4 3D V cache, I expect to be nothing short of phenomenal. There's talk that's somewhat reliable, maybe, that they could hit 5 gigahertz. We would expect the packaging technology to become significantly better with the second generation of hybrid bonding, HBI, which is the hybrid bonding interface, and how they meld these together top to bottom. If you follow the semiconductor industry, you would know that they have made some absolutely cataclysmic advances in this technology over the last 3 years. AMD's generation that they released the last time, how they were doing HBI, I won't go into it, but there's a lot of constraints. It's a first generation technology. The jump from first gen HBI hybrid bonding to second and now third is tremendous. Even if they're just going to second gen, we could probably see up to 5 gigahertz because they have so much better connection, and the thermal dissipation capabilities of this of the stacks are increased tremendously. AMD is going to have to be careful about releasing too much Zen 4D. Like Zen 3D, like the 5800X 3D with Zen 3, they have to be careful not to cannibalize their higher margin, bigger products. Why are you going to buy these other products? Why would you buy a $699 7950X if the $400 whatever it will be X3D is faster? This is dangerous for them. I mean, they can't beat their previous gen chip with their new hotness. That's not great in many ways, but they want to be able to claim that they have the fastest gaming chip in the world because that's priceless in the world of marketing. You can't put a dollar tag on that. I mean, it is everything. And I don't know. We'll see how many people are thinking that they'll release multiple SKUs. I think they'll do exactly what they did now.
They'll just do a single 8-core.
That's what I believe. I believe you'll see one 8-core. They could probably do a 16. It's going to be. I hope it's going to be too expensive to do it over multiple. Yeah. That's just going to price it into the stratosphere. So
the 3D chips, the stacked L3 that they're adding, it was 64 megabytes with the 5800X 3D, right?
Yes, off the top of my head.
Are we expecting that to stay the same or change?
It should stay the same.
Okay. And
I mean, you would imagine, but so when it comes to the L3 chiplet that they put on top of there is actually denser than their actual the actual chiplet, the CCD underneath. They've done a lot of, it's a specialized process. They've stripped out all kinds of stuff, like all of the control tags and all of the circuitry is actually down on the CCD. So the registers and everything to run that is down on the bottom because it's faster. It's a very stupid piece of silicon. It's dumb. There's no control circuitry. So it's super dense. And they've also made it super thin. So that's a whole topic. But yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, this is imagine. Cool. Oh wait, no, I don't want to imagine a 5900X 3D. I want a 7900X 3D or 7950X 3D.
Whatever it is, it's going to be phenomenal paired with the Zen 4 processors or microarchitecture.
Yeah. Another question, Phantom Channel: Will Intel ever make HEDT platform again?
Sure.
Someday.
Maybe. They got quite literally ran out of the HEDT market by Threadripper. They couldn't compete, and every review that you saw of it was just brand destruction. The X299 reviews back then, like the 10980XE, just look at the coverage from the media. Yeah, it's just brand destruction. Let's be honest. It was painful for them to continue, so they stopped. When they get to a position where they can become competitive or lead, I fully expect them to make a triumphant return.
I mean, the interesting thing is,
will that be now or later? I don't know. And
the flip side of this is AMD and Intel have effectively run the HEDT out of the market because,
correct,
you don't
need it.
Yeah, it's like you need more than 16 cores, 24 cores. Like some people do, but they also need workstations, and workstations already exist as a platform that costs a lot more. So.
Correct. And let's talk about this for a minute. There two of the primary reasons to go HEDT. One was more PCIe lanes. But back then, you needed a NIC, and you needed to connect more RAID devices, and which we don't even use RAID anymore. Really, a dedicated hardware RAID card is going the way of the dinosaur, which kind of sucks. I mean, I loved them. I tested them for like a decade. But anyway, see what I used to do. But
back before he was storage. A CPU guru.
Yeah, before CPUs, I was storage. But you don't need that anymore, and you don't need to put a 10 gigabit NIC on your thing. It's built into the board. Right? You don't need a card for some fast USB connection or Thunderbolt or whatever. It's all built into the board. You don't need a Wi-Fi card. It's built into the board.
You don't need two graphics cards because
SLI
is not supported.
Yes, because it's worthless. So all of these things that justified the increased PCIe slot that we need more lanes, they're gone. I mean, M.2 is on your motherboard. So if you want fast storage, the M.2 slots on your motherboard, you just buy one with more. If you want to put even more, then you get something like, well, I've got this massive stupid card that holds like 8 M.2 cards.
Yes.
It's around here somewhere. I don't know. But, it's
misplaced your super expensive card.
Yeah, because I have lots of stuff. But, it's a big card that you put in there, and it holds like 6 or 4 or 6. I think you can even get something to hold 8 M.2 in one slot. Sure, you're going to be a little bit bandwidth constrained. But, I mean, we're getting to the point to where these use cases that you need that many PCIe lanes are firmly rooted in professional users. The average folk, even the extra 1% of the enthusiast market, probably really doesn't need a lot of that PCIe. Then you look at memory throughput, and having more channels and more memory throughput was a very big reason to go workstation. Now you've got DDR5, right? I mean, we just have this massive boom.
Well, what if I want quad channel DDR5, Paul?
Now you're a professional, because what really needs that, right? What really needs that level of bandwidth? And then when you look at, I mean, really, what does? And then finally more cores. Well, we all know the story there. I mean, we've got so many cores on mainstream desktop. It's stupid. Who needs it, right?
So here's an interesting question, and Bryman says, hey, do you think the 7800X will have the 3D cache? Now, there is no 7800X right now.
They left a hole for it.
Yeah, they left a hole. So it's like we had a 5800X and a 5700X and a 5900X, and then we got the 5800X 3D.
So the thing is this, from a marketing perspective and from a brand perspective, it's best to have to communicate as clearly as possible. Don't look at anything AMD has done on the mobile side, because that is the exact opposite of communicating clearly. It's like, I need a sundial. Okay, come on. But anyway, when it comes to the desktop or any product stack, you want it to be clear. Before, they had the 5800X, and then they kind of bolted on the 5800X 3D. I think they've made a smart decision to just have 7800X 3D. No 7800. I think they left the hole. I hope that's what they did.
It sure looks like it, right?
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, there isn't one.
And it is kind of like, it was a weird thing. Like, how different was the 5700X from the 5800X?
Oh, come on, man. Nothing.
Like
5700X, I called it in the title of the review I wrote, was a price cut in disguise. I mean, there's no difference between them. It's just cheaper.
It was like Intel back in the day when they used to have all these processors models where they were all separated by 100 megahertz or whatever, and like over time that became kind of stupid. Well, it felt like the 5700X was a little bit of a throwback to that. It came later because it was a price cut.
Did anybody forget the XT?
Yeah,
XT was it? You know what? I read everybody that reviews, and I live CPUs, and I can't think of the last time I saw an XT in a test pool or even the words written down. It's like the generation of CPUs that time.
It never happened. It's kind of like the Radeon 7. Like,
it should have never happened.
No one tests with the Radeon 7, even if they test Vega. Like I did test it for my GPU benchmarks, but that was actually, and this is funny, Radeon 7 was actually the only card that did not like my test bed when I had rebar enabled. Would not post. So,
Bryman is a good point. So,
which one do you want? This one?
I agree, Lord Eric.
Or-
It is locked away
this one.
somewhere. I have them sitting around somewhere at the bottom of a dusty box. But okay,
This one.
can't wait till November when the PCIe 5.0 NVMe M.2 SSDs come out. Yes, I agree. I'm right there with you, especially when we look at direct storage. Direct storage is insane. We have a review if you get some time. It's a preview of special direct storage enabled stuff, and it shows that during gaming for direct storage, it's reading at like 6 gigabytes a second the whole time or something. It's crazy, but this will be great for that. But there are some caveats with M.2 and PCIe 5.0. So Micron is making the first vendor to make the NAND chips for the SSDs for PCIe 5.0, because the NAND chips have to be much faster. Each chip has to have a faster, everything in this chain has to be faster. And it goes all the way down to the NAND chip because you're doubling throughput. Micron has advertised their new NAND as being 2,400 megatransfers a second, but they had a problem. It didn't yield well when they first started making it. So the first versions of their NAND is coming out at 1,600 megatransfers a second. This is the long way of me telling you that the first PCIe 5.0 SSDs will not be as that fast. They'll be faster than PCIe 4.0, but not a whole, like 30%. Okay. They're not going to be double. You'll need to wait until January or February, hopefully, before we start seeing the 2000. They're going to have some intermediate steps as their yields improve. 1,600, and I think it's 2024. The real fast ones will start coming out early next year. Don't buy the first wave.
All right, I think we've we feel for you, Brian, man.
Yep.
Like, that's so exciting. There's all these things coming out, but then you're like, oh man, like, I hope you've got a. I mean, we're lucky. We're enthusiasts as our job, right? So,
Board Erica makes a good point. So when you look at sequentials, unless you're doing a lot of file transfers, video processing, you do a lot of that. That is very throughput limited, or stuff like that. Like I said, direct storage, you'll definitely need PCIe 5.0. If you're not doing a lot of things like that, and direct storage with games, there's going to be like 2 or 3 within the next year or 2. You probably don't need it right now. Most 99% will not use it.
While we're on the storage topic, Paul,
but real fast.
Oh,
the Samsung stuck with their new SSD. What is it? The 990 Pro. They stuck with PCIe 4.0, and that is a beastly SSD. If you're looking for something that is massive random performance, because you really don't need sequentials, most people don't. That's a surprisingly good. It's still on PCIe 4.0, but that's probably, for me, the SSD to beat for at least a year or 2.
How bad is QLC NAND? Has it gotten to the point where you can get performant drives with it?
Yes, and a lot of that is because they've become so sophisticated with how they do SLC caching. I mean, QLC is
because I've got
there's trade-offs. There's
that...
trade-offs, but for the vast majority, QLC should be fine as long as it's a modern QLC. If you're looking at like buying one of the older ones, I'd probably kind of, but like a modern QLC, if for overwhelming majority of people, it's going to do you well.
I've got a laptop with an Intel 660p in it, and oh man, it's painful. And
Now that's exactly one. Avoid that. Yeah.
Yep. And the funny thing is that laptop is nowhere near as old as the 660p. It's a Tiger Lake, so the 660p came out, I want to say, like 4 years ago, and Tiger Lake only came out 2 years ago. So, the fact that anyway.
SATA is dead on desktop. Yeah. I mean,
all right.
We've been hearing SATA is dead forever, but all right.
Let's see. SATA card, PCI Express. This one we don't know yet, right?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that.
We'll find out in 3 weeks.
My instinct.
Or 4 weeks.
My instinct is whatever is you can get at a better price. I think they're going to be that close.
And it also depends on what you're running
on
and
the
what
high
you
end.
need to do.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Do you really need a 7950X? First of all, that's the first question to ask
If you're
yourself.
running Zen 3 or Alder Lake already, especially the Ryzen 9, like you have to have a really good reason to upgrade. And I'm not sure it's there. I swear someone said something about Meteor Lake earlier in the comments, but like that's supposed to be the one that could be the bigger deal for Intel, right? As nice as Raptor Lake is sounding, Meteor Lake
Meteor
is,
Lake, it sounds like it's going to be the step function, the big moonshot, the huge jump, right? Like to
like
where
Zen 4 to Zen 3 is a huge gain, and basically that Intel's Meteor Lake could be bigger than that.
here's the
Maybe.
thing. I Zen 3 to Zen 4 is impressive, yes, but I think I'm kind of surprised about how much of Ryzen 7000, the actual chip itself, the actual improvement just comes from power. It
Yeah,
comes
that's
from
true.
power delivery, and I wouldn't say I'm disappointed by Zen 4, but AMD itself does say Zen 4 is an iteration. It is an
Yeah.
iterative update. It is not a grounds up redesign, so you shouldn't expect too much from it. The majority of these gains, it comes from power. They're pumping power, and that 5 nanometer process, of course, is part of that. But at the end of the day, they're just pumping power.
So do you think Zen 5, like Zen 5
Zen 5
next
is
year?
grounds up. Zen 5 is a grounds up redesign. AMD
Is that
says
supposed to be
year.
next year? And
Yes.
and is that supposed to be still on 5 nanometer, or are they going to go down to N3?
Oh,
Like that's
hold
probably
on.
not
I have to
officially
look.
stated,
There's
but
so many roadmaps. Let me see. Let me Google something. I've written it down somewhere. 3 nanometers Zen 5 by 2024. And here's the thing: I have no reason to believe that AMD will not deliver on that timeline because AMD has yet to miss one.
they said 2024 or
Oh,
23.
By 2024, which means in 2020.
Does it?
20. Yeah, it's the way that they do their roadmaps. It's like
Okay,
a stupid thing but it should be 2023. Basically, they have 2024, and the processors are listed before that.
All right. Well, I think we've about beat this horse into the ground again. I actually have to get off and go do some stuff. Check Tom's Hardware in about. I'm trying to think. I can't remember if it's at 3 p.m. my time or 3 p.m. Eastern time, or like there's something happened later today. Go hit up our site. I'll have more to say about it there. And could be exciting. Should be exciting. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you next week.